Well, the title's already been said, so it's a long title. I won't repeat it. So we'll go straight to background. Scoping reviews are a useful approach, and they're designed to provide a comprehensive picture of the available evidence using structured, identifiable methods to answer a research question and reach a position in describing next steps. In the social science literature around OTP, user-centered care is a non-negotiable construct. So assessing the emerging options of LAIB provides benefit for service users and service providers through an analysis of treatment approaches, service user goals within a public health policy and practices, and OTP itself. The aims and objectives of the, gosh, can that go up a bit? Anyway. What would you like? Well, I'll turn around. If that could go up just to slide only would be really great. Yeah, brilliant. Basically, the aims and objectives of this scoping review are to systematically describe and synthesize findings from the qualitative research on users' experiences of LAIB and within the broader OTP framework, and to describe the breadth and depth of the existing evidence, assess its potential to inform policy and practice, and to identify gaps to inform future research priorities. And of course, you can see the research question for this review, which is important for all scoping reviews. What qualitative evidence exists on the experience of people previously or currently prescribed LAIB as part of their opioid treatment journey that can be used to guide policy and practice, and what key considerations remain unexplored? So for the methods, we used, and guided by ASCII, Jones, Peters and others, and Long, who helped us, who have already started and know how to do scoping reviews. We started with the inclusion criteria, which is basically a PICO framework derivative, and we looked at the population, which I've already said are participants on long-acting injectable buprenorphine, the concept being opioid dependence and being part of an opioid treatment program, and the context is being on or currently on or have been on LAIB, and what are the perspectives, experiences and preferences. And the studies we looked at was any qualitative data from case reports, interviews, focus groups, open-ended or structured questionnaires, and mixed method design is all part of our study design. And the only other restrictions were global, English language only, peer-reviewed, and 2016 to present. So here's our PRISMA flow chart, which is also part of a scoping review, and it really shows that scoping reviews are done by a team. We started in June 2024 and searched all 6 databases again in June 2025, and ended up coming up with 837 studies for abstract title screening, of which we got down to 149, and excluded 110 and looked at full text review for the remaining 39 with citation chaining, which is basically trying to find what was in the references of all those 39 papers. We found one other, and we had 40 included studies. 2 reviewers were assigned all of those steps in the PRISMA flowchart, and any disagreements are resolved by discussion and consensus. Here are the 40 studies. They were all conducted in high-income countries, with most of them coming from UK, Australia and the US. 30 used a qualitative design using semi-structured interviews. 8 had a longitudinal design. 1 a randomised qualitative content analysis. 1 qualitative open-ended questionnaire. 7 case reports, and 1 was mixed method. And I guess the only other thing I'd note is that the Australian studies had a strong methodological framework, particularly science and technology studies, feminist-informed and critical drug study scholarship. And there were some from the England and Wales that did the same. So then we conducted a qualitative thematic analysis of the results section of those included papers. The process of that begins with an open inductive coding to identify key patterns across the studies, and then we systematically collated and synthesized these into higher order themes relevant to our objectives. The entire process is reflexive, inherently subjective, being who we are, and geared towards the organic and evolving shaping of a reflective development process in the production of these themes. Those are the themes that evolved, and I'll discuss each of these next one by one. Navigating LAIP is really about notions of concept of time and temporality, space and well-being, place and context are all deeply entangled. LAIP is dynamic, journey-bound, moving to and from and within through initiation, being on LAIP and discontinuation. Milestones along the trajectory were framed as markers of progress or transformation. We gain time, we lose temporal restrictions and geographic constraints, being the dosing site, but that means different things for different people. And we had to look at that, and the studies looked at that within wider socio-political constructs like housing, employment, and money. For effects and side effects, there was a lot of descriptions around effects, and they were described as satisfaction, cravings, withdrawal, dose effects, tolerance, use, control, and then all these descriptors were set within continuums and binaries like reduced, increased, gain, loss, high, low, stable, chaotic, short-term, long-term. But what was common was descriptions of injection site pain, lumps, and irritation, and these were major enough for people to discontinue LAIB. Fatigue, constipation, and anxiety were also reported, and there were also inconsistencies about LAIB in terms of not holding them for the entire time of their cycle, whether it was weekly or monthly, what was the blockade effect and how that felt, supplemental drug use, which included either sublingual buprenorphine or illicit drug use. They were all major concerns, and they also created a sense of ambivalence amongst the service users. But users reported also positive physiological and psychological effects via the long-term engagement. Some of the studies we looked at were over 12 months, a longitudinal design, and that improved their clarity, their settled sleep, their increased confidence, and improved relationships and enhanced quality of life. For the services, the use of lidocaine was interesting in one study as a potential to reduce injection site pain. Low-dose ketamine and other induction strategies like microdosing have continued to evolve the induction process for getting onto LAIB. But ultimately, accurate resources and information, including peer approaches about what buprenorphine as an active part of LAIB is, was considered really important. Next one is service provider role and impact. User-centered care is central to the positive experiences of and treatment retention. Coercion, limited choice, rigid practices, including stigma, reduced service user trust and autonomy. Joint decision-making, peer-led education, and wraparound support improved satisfaction as a particular measure. And there was a balance between autonomy and reduced contract and the therapeutic connection and psychosocial support, and that went both ways in terms of the continuum. There were structural barriers, e.g. transport, that shaped LAB service user engagement. And the studies highlighted the importance of ongoing monitoring and the provision, again, of accurate, trustworthy communication between service provider and service user as essential. For the services, the sustained engagement across the entire LAIB landscape is central to a positive outcome. Empathy, trust, relational connection, clinical awareness, and psychosocial support all contribute significantly to a service user's perception of quality and fostering a positive service experience. Next one is harm reduction and recovery as a theme. Recovery was often framed in the studies as personal growth, resilience, and responsibility, and it was associated and valued as abstinence, whereas others framed recovery as stability and control, but others felt trapped in sobriety and ambivalent about abstinence as a goal. And some others, yet again, preferred harm reduction approaches to flexibility and inclusivity in making their own journey in the world. Harm reduction was seen by some service users enabling choice and agency, including the use of other drugs. So for the services, the tensions between that abstinence-focused and harm reduction models persisted, but not only for service providers, it was also for service users. There was quite a tension. Stigma and criminalisation. Stigma does not disappear, it's redefined. Stigma persists in social, internalized, and institutional norms and mechanisms, even though LAB reduces or conceals opiate treatment visibility and daily clinic exposure. But discussions of internalized shame still persisted, replacing one drug for another. Others struggled with explaining the lump and the pervasive sense of being marked by that lump. Social othering and being exposed as being on OTP remains a major concern. Criminalisation and incarceration experiences shape treatment engagement, including transition to community, impacting continuity of care and interrupting service access. So for the services, there was persistent stigma in carceral and healthcare systems, and that really affected service users' trajectories. Criminalisation and policing was also, as part of the studies, undermined engagement in some of the studies, and incarcerated users actually valued LAOB for privacy and reduced diversion risk whilst inside, and they said that that increased their agency. To conclude, really, navigation is about time, pace, and space. Mostly the positive changes are observed in LAIB across the qualitative literature. Service users reporting game changer shifts in normality, place, gains in time, savings in not going to the dosing site, and quality of life transformation and the space about who they are and what they did. Consistent reports of convenience, flexibility and freedom promote this formulation as opening new ways of being and living and on OTP. For effects and side effects, the injection site, pain and lump were, including internalised and structural stigma, were major sticking points for LAOB overall, and wraparound psychosocial support, therapeutic alliance, treatment planning, including goals and activities from the service user, are vital for LAOB as it is for OTP. Interestingly, the disconnection and discontinuation with services was significant, so less contact with services recognised that there were negative perceptions of LAOB as a result. Dose wouldn't hold them over the time cycle, there was no contact with service, and the disconnection often left to discontinuation. Opportunities exist for service user-centred interventions to improve retention, such as telehealth services, probably a little bit of a high-income kind of thing, this sort of stuff, maybe not. Integrated mental health care, transitional care, particularly out of incarcerated spaces, and stable housing support in particular. Harm reduction and recovery, the ongoing principles of harm reduction need to be reinforced. As a holistic, user-centred application of open-ended choice, cannot end up preferencing LAOB at the expense of other pharmacological options. And overall, recovery was a tricky concept for a lot of the service users in the studies. Like all formulations, the importance of accurate information and resources for LAOB, including peer-based support and mechanisms for connection, is needed. Power dynamics, agency, and autonomy were important consideration for service users, reflecting the need for a co-produced participatory research approach led by people who inject drugs or opioid treatment. Choice is fundamental. Oh, I've got a little bit, there should be one more. Did I? Lovely, gaps. My final slide. The qualitative evidence is a mixed bag. Service users presented every way. Resisting binaries, is LAOB another formulation for choice or another formulation by force? A significant number of qualitative studies were embedded in a parent or clinical trial which may not reflect real-world conditions. This is important. LAOB retention data seems variable. When you look at the quantitative literature, it says that LAOB is on par or worse than methadone or sibling or buprenorphine retention rates. And I'll cite Farrell, 2024, an Australian guy did the CoLab study. At 96 weeks, it was 47%. And there's a US study in 2025 that had better retention and lower dropout for sublingual buprenorphine than LAIB in a data analysis cohort. They're just two examples. More research is needed to what and why service users uptake, discontinue, or prefer any type of formulation for opioid treatment. The LAOB user experience is best viewed through a biopsychosocial lens, incorporating wider healthcare, cultural, and structural frameworks and influences. This illustrates LAOB as a fluid, relational, and dynamic treatment with multiple outcomes. The new formulation is part of the OTP pharmaceutical toolbox, and this scoping review confirms that no one-size-fits-all axiom for service users. Many of the studies rework the same population cohort, looking at different aspects of LOB experiences for users, and this limits our applicability of the 40 studies to all users, and that all the studies are within high-income countries. More studies are needed to broaden our understandings in a global way, including new cohorts and their contexts, places and spaces, as well as the healthcare models that users are recruited from. Another gap, almost a complete lack of stated or described community involvement, excepting two. So I'm proud to be part of a community-led scoping review that in a small way will be part of all our efforts to increase community-led research. In conclusion, the studies reveal an ambiguous, non-polar, continuous, situated assessment of LAIB, and placed relationally in a number of ways at many points in a particular trajectory across multiple continuums and measurements. The emerging ambiguity underscores the idea of ambivalence as a central analytical concept in thinking about LOB as experience, represented and imagined, and LOB effectiveness, like methadone and buprenorphine or buprenorphine, cannot be determined on formulation alone. It is people, it is people, it is people. Thank you very much.